before we begin, imagine discovering the lup one morning and discovering the love of your life no longer remembers you. Not because they stopped loving you, not because they left, but because every memory of you is gone. Now, imagine having to watch them fall in love with you all over again, while knowing they may never remember the life you shared. If you love emotional werewolf romance, second chance love stories, possessive alpha kings, and endings that make your heart ache, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Could you fall in love with the same person twice? Because tonight's story isn't about finding your soulmate. It's about, finding them again. The attack happened just before dawn. The kingdom of Winter Hollow slept beneath heavy snowfall, while icy winds rattled the castle windows. Inside the royal chambers, Ava Winter woke suddenly. Something felt wrong. The mate bond. For 3 years, she had felt it every moment of every day. Warm, steady, comforting. But now, pain exploded through it. Ava shot upright in bed, her heart pounded. Ronan. No answer. The Alpha's side of the bed was empty, cold. A distant horn suddenly echoed across the kingdom. Then another. And another. Emergency alarms. The castle was under attack. Ava ran. Barefoot, still wearing her sleeping gown. She rushed into the hallway just as warriors sprinted past. Fear spread through the castle like wildfire. Rogues! They breached the eastern wall. The Alpha is injured. The last words stopped her heart. Ava froze. For one terrible second, she couldn't breathe. Then, she ran faster. The courtyard looked like a battlefield, snow-stained red. Broken weapons scattered across frozen stone, warriors dragging wounded wolves toward healers. And in the center, Alpha King Ronan Vale, unconscious, covered in blood. Ava's entire world collapsed. No! She pushed through the crowd desperately. Move! The healers stepped aside. A deep wound stretched across Ronan's head. Blood soaked his dark hair. His skin looked pale. Too pale. Ava dropped to her knees beside him. Ronan! Her voice broke. Nothing. No response. The strongest Alpha in the north lay completely still. For the first time in years. She felt terrified. 3 days later, he finally woke. The entire kingdom celebrated. The Luna cried with relief. The healers called it a miracle. But miracles sometimes hide disasters. Ava rushed toward his chamber the moment she heard the news. Her hands shook. Tears filled her eyes. For 3 days, she barely slept, barely ate, barely left his side. Now he was awake. Everything would be okay. It had to be. Ava entered the room. Sunlight spilled across the bed. Ronan sat upright against the pillows. Alive, breathing, beautiful. The sight nearly broke her. A smile spread across her face. Ronan! His silver eyes lifted toward her, and everything changed because he looked confused. Not relieved, not happy, confused. Ava stopped walking. Something cold crawled through her chest. Ronan? Silence. Then he spoke. 4 simple words. 4 words that shattered her completely. Who are you? The room disappeared. Ava couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. The healers exchanged nervous glances. Ronan frowned slightly, like he genuinely didn't understand why she looked devastated. Who are you? He repeated. Ava stared at him. 3 years. 3 years together. 3 years of laughter. 3 years of love. Gone. Gone in a single moment. Her voice barely worked. It's me. Silence. Nothing. No recognition. No memory. No emotion. Just confusion. I'm Ava. Ronan searched his mind. Nothing. The realization hit him slowly. He knew his kingdom, his warriors, his responsibilities. But her? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The mate bond still existed. But the memories were gone. The kingdom learned the truth by sunset. The Alpha remembered everything. Except his Luna. Whispers spread through the castle. Servants lowered their voices. Warriors avoided looking at Ava because nobody knew what to say. How do you comfort someone whose husband forgot she exists? That night, Ava sat alone in the royal garden. Snow drifted softly around her. The cold didn't matter. Nothing mattered. 3 years. Gone. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "You should be inside!" Ava looked up. Ronan stood nearby. The sight hurt more than she expected, because he looked exactly the same. Same eyes, same face, same voice, same man. Yet somehow, a stranger. Ava forced a smile. "I like the snow." Ronan hesitated, then sat beside her. An awkward silence followed, the kind of silence that never existed before. Finally, he spoke. "The healers said we were happy." The words nearly broke her. "We were." Ronan looked toward the snow-covered mountains. "I wish I remembered." Ava closed her eyes, because so did she. Days became weeks. The kingdom slowly returned to normal. But Ava's heart never did. Every morning she woke beside a man who didn't remember loving her. Every meal felt awkward. Every conversation felt painful. And somehow, the mate bond remained. The wolf still recognized her, even if the man didn't. One evening, a strange thing happened. Ava laughed, a genuine laugh. One of the kitchen servants had accidentally dropped an entire cake. The poor boy looked horrified. Everyone else panicked. Ava laughed, and for one brief second, Ronan froze. Because something inside him responded. Not a memory, a feeling. Warm, familiar, his wolf stirred. Mine. The word echoed inside his head. Ronan frowned, confused, because for the first time since losing his memories, something about Ava felt familiar. Not in his mind, in his heart, and somewhere deep inside. His wolf had already begun remembering her. Before we continue, imagine every memory of the person you once loved, yet every time they walk into a room, your heart beats faster. Every time another man talks to them, something inside you becomes angry. And every night, you find yourself thinking about them. When you should be sleeping, what if love doesn't live in memories? What if it lives somewhere deeper? If you're enjoying the story so far, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. Do you think true love can survive without memories? Because Ronan is about to discover something terrifying. His heart remembers what his mind forgot. The first sign came 2 weeks later. Ronan was in the training yard watching warriors practice when he noticed Ava walking across the courtyard. She wasn't doing anything special, just carrying a basket of herbs toward the healer's wing. Yet somehow, his eyes followed her without permission, without reason, without understanding why. A warrior beside him noticed. "Your Majesty?" Ronan blinked. "What?" The warrior smiled slightly. "You've been staring at the Luna for several minutes." Ronan immediately looked away, annoyed. Not at the warrior, at himself, because the man was right. He had been staring. Again. Lately, it happened often. Too often. Whenever Ava entered a room, he noticed. Whenever she smiled, he noticed. Whenever she laughed, he noticed. And he hated not understanding why. That evening, Ronan found himself standing outside the healer's wing. For no reason, at least. That was what he told himself. Through the doorway, he could see Ava tending to an injured child. The little girl couldn't have been older than 7. Her arm was badly scratched. Tears filled her eyes. Ava knelt beside her, patient, gentle, kind. "It's going to sting for a second," Ava said softly. The child nodded bravely. Ava cleaned the wound. Then she smiled. The little girl smiled back immediately. Within moments, the child stopped crying. Ronan watched quietly. Something warm settled inside his chest. A strange feeling. A dangerous feeling. Because he suddenly understood why the kingdom loved her, and why he probably used to. Later that night, he found an old wooden chest inside his chambers. The chest belonged to him, yet somehow he had never opened it since the accident. Curiosity won. Ronan lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of letters, all written in his own handwriting. His heart slowed. Every letter was addressed to one person, Ava. His fingers tightened. Slowly, he opened the first one. My Ava, you smiled at me today while it was snowing. I know that sounds ridiculous. Kings shouldn't write letters about smiles. But somehow your smile always feels like home. Ronan froze, then opened another. My Ava, if I ever become too proud, remind me who I was before I became king. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Another. My Ava, sometimes I wake up before you just so I can watch you sleep. Don't laugh. I'm serious. Ronan sat completely still. Hours passed. He read every letter, every single one, and with each page, something inside him hurt. Because the man who wrote these letters loved her completely, unconditionally, deeply. The kind of love people spend entire lifetimes searching for, and yet, he couldn't remember any of it. For the first time since the accident, Ronan felt jealous. Not of another man, of himself, of the version of himself who remembered her. The next morning brought trouble. A visiting Alpha arrived from a neighboring kingdom. Alpha Tristan Frost. Young, powerful, charismatic, the kind of man people liked immediately, including Ava, not romantically, just naturally. Tristan was kind, funny, easy to talk to. Something Ronan hadn't been since losing his memories. During dinner, Tristan made Ava laugh 3 times. Ronan counted. Not intentionally. It just happened. Every laugh felt strangely irritating. By the 4th one, his mood darkened. By the 5th, his wolf growled. Low, dangerous, warning. The dining hall fell silent. Tristan raised an eyebrow. Ava looked confused. Ronan stood abruptly. I'm done. Then he left. The entire room stared after him. Even he didn't understand why he was angry. Unfortunately, his wolf did. That night, Ava was walking through the castle gardens when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Ronan stood there. Snow drifted softly between them. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Ava sighed. You've been following me. No, you absolutely have. Silence. Then, I wanted to talk. Ava crossed her arms. About what? Ronan hesitated. Because saying the truth sounded ridiculous. Then again, nothing about this situation made sense anymore. Tristan. Ava blinked. What about him? His jaw tightened. He talks to you a lot. Ava stared, then laughed. Actually laughed. And somehow that irritated him more. You're jealous. No. Ronan, I'm not jealous. Ava raised an eyebrow. Then, why are we standing in the snow discussing another man? Silence. The answer should have been obvious. Yet Ronan couldn't bring himself to say it. Because if he admitted it, he'd have to admit something else. Something far more dangerous. He was falling for her. Again. Ava looked away first. The amusement disappeared from her face. A sad smile replaced it. You know what's funny? Ronan frowned. What? You used to get jealous all the time. His heartbeat stumbled. Ava laughed softly. If a warrior looked at me too long, you'd spend the entire day glaring at him. Something strange happened. For a brief second, an image flashed inside his mind. A memory. Tiny. Broken. Incomplete. A snowy ballroom. Ava laughing. His arm around her waist. Then, gone! Ronan froze. His breathing stopped. Ava noticed immediately. What happened? I saw something. Her eyes widened. A memory? I don't know. Hope appeared in her expression so quickly it hurt him, because he wanted to give it to her, wanted to remember, wanted to become the man she lost. But the memory vanished before he could hold on to it, and the disappointment in her eyes nearly destroyed him. That night, neither of them slept well. Ava lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the memory, thinking about hope. thinking about how dangerous hope could be. Across the hall, Ronan sat beside the window watching snowfall, thinking about her, always her. The realization finally became impossible to ignore. He didn't remember loving Ava, but he loved her company. He loved her smile. He loved hearing her laugh. He loved how she cared about everyone. And worst of all, he was beginning to need her. The same way a starving man needs food. The same way winter needs. His wolf stirred inside him, satisfied. Because it had known the truth long before he did, Ronan may have lost his memories, but he was already falling in love with his wife. All over again. He just hadn't admitted it yet. Meanwhile, someone watched from the shadows. Someone who had spent 3 years hiding a secret. The same person responsible for the attack. The same person who wanted Ronan to forget Ava. And now, as they watched the Alpha fall in love with her again, they realized something terrifying. Their plan was failing, so they made a decision. If Ronan couldn't forget Ava, then Ava would have to disappear. Forever, before we continue. Imagine falling in love with someone all over again, only to discover that someone is about to be taken from you, not because fate is cruel, not because love failed, but because someone was willing to destroy an entire kingdom to keep you apart. If you've stayed with this story until now, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Would you wait for someone you loved, even if they forgot you? Tonight, an Alpha is about to discover that true love isn't remembered. It's chosen. The attack came 3 nights later. Ava never saw it coming. The evening had been peaceful. Snow drifted softly beyond the castle windows while servants prepared for the winter festival for the first time in months. Ava felt hopeful. Not because Ronan remembered, he didn't, but because something was changing. The distance between them felt smaller. The walls around his heart were breaking, and for the first time since the accident, she believed they might survive this. Then everything went wrong. Ava was walking through the castle library when she heard footsteps behind her. At first, she ignored them. The castle was always busy. But then, a cloth covered her mouth. Her scream never escaped. Darkness swallowed her instantly. Hours later, Ronan entered Ashmurdber's. Empty. The bed untouched. The room cold. Something felt wrong immediately. His wolf reacted first. Danger. Ronan searched the room. Nothing. Then he found it. A silver bracelet. Broken. Lying near the doorway. Ava never removed it. Never. Fear exploded through him. Real fear. The kind that froze blood. Ava! His roar shook the entire castle. Within minutes, every warrior in Winter Hollow was searching. Torches illuminated snowy forests. Scouts rode through the mountains. The kingdom stopped sleeping. But nobody found her. Not until dawn. A wounded guard was discovered near the northern road, barely alive. Ronan grabbed him immediately. Where is she? The guard coughed blood, then whispered, They took the Luna. Ronan's entire body went still. They? The guard nodded weakly, then spoke a name. A name nobody expected. Lord Varric, the king's trusted advisor. The man who had served beside Ronan for years. The man who helped raise him. The man everyone trusted. Silence filled the throne room, because suddenly everything made sense. The rogue attack. The memory loss. The missing evidence. The strange accidents. Varric had orchestrated everything. For years, the old advisor carried a terrible secret. Ava's bloodline. Ava descended from the ancient moonborn wolves, a bloodline believed extinct, a bloodline capable of strengthening kingdoms beyond imagination. Varric planned to control that power himself. But one thing ruined his plan, the mate bond. So, he attacked Ronan, hoping memory loss would destroy their relationship, hoping Ava would eventually leave. When that failed, he kidnapped her. Ronan didn't speak for several minutes. Then finally, he stood, slowly, dangerously. Every warrior in the room stepped backward, because they had never seen their alpha look like this before. Not angry, not furious, broken, and broken men are far more dangerous. Prepare the army. His voice was quiet, too quiet. We leave immediately. Meanwhile, Ava opened her eyes inside an ancient stone fortress hidden deep within the mountains. Cold chains wrapped around her wrists. Moonlight spilled through narrow windows, and standing before her was Lord Varric. The old man smiled sadly. You always were the difficult one. Ava stared at him in disbelief. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Varric sighed. Because power changes everything. Ava shook her head. You destroyed lives. I built a future. His expression hardened. Kings rise and fall, but bloodlines last forever. The old man's eyes narrowed. You were never meant to love Ronan. Ava laughed bitterly. Funny. Varric frowned. What's funny? You spent years trying to separate us. Her eyes filled with tears. And somehow all you did was make him fall in love with me twice, far away. Ronan rode through a blizzard, his army behind him, his wolf barely controlled. The bond still connected him to Ava, faint, weak, but alive, and every second she remained. And in danger. Something inside him shattered further. By sunset, they found the fortress, hidden among frozen cliffs. Ancient, silent, waiting. The final battle began immediately. Snow exploded beneath charging wolves. Steel clashed against steel. Warriors roared. The mountains echoed with violence. But Ronan noticed none of it. He only cared about one thing. Ava, finding her, saving her, bringing her home. Inside the fortress, Varric heard the battle beginning. His expression darkened. He came. Ava smiled through tears. Of course he did. Varric shook his head. He doesn't even remember you. Ava's smile never faded. No, she whispered softly. He just loves me anyway. The fortress doors exploded inward. Stone shattered. Warriors rushed inside, and standing at the center was Ronan. Covered in snow, covered in blood, silver eyes burning. The moment he saw Ava, everything else disappeared. The chains, the enemies, the battle, the world. Only her remained. Ava! Her name sounded like a prayer. Varric moved first. A hidden blade flashed toward Ava. Time slowed. Ronan reacted instantly, without hesitation. He threw himself between them. The blade struck deep. Silence. Ava screamed. Ronan staggered. Blood stained the snow-covered floor. And for one terrible second, the entire world stopped. Ava! His voice barely worked. She dropped beside him, tears streaming down her face. No! Her hands trembled. No, no, no! Ronan smiled weakly, and suddenly, a memory returned, then another, and another. Like floodgates opening, the first time he met her, their wedding, their first dance, the night she told him she loved him. Every letter, every promise, every kiss, everything. All of it came rushing back. Tears filled his eyes, not from pain, from regret. 3 years of memories returned in a single moment. Ava, his voice broke. I remember, she froze. What? Ronan laughed weakly, then cried, actually cried, because the weight of everything finally returned. Every memory, every promise, every moment, and the realization nearly destroyed him. He remembered loving her, and he remembered losing her. Ava, his hand found hers. I am so sorry. She shook her head immediately. No. Yes, his voice cracked. I forgot you. You didn't choose that. I should have protected you. Tears rolled down his face. And somehow, he laughed softly, I fell in love with you again anyway. Ava broke completely. The fortress, the battle, the fear, everything disappeared. Only him remained. Ronan squeezed her hand gently, then spoke the words she had waited months to hear. Not because she needed them, but because he finally understood them. I chose you when I remembered. His eyes locked onto hers, and I chose you again when I didn't. Ava cried harder, because there was no greater proof of love than that. Varric was defeated before sunrise. The war ended, the kingdom survived, and Winter Hollow celebrated set it for 7 days. But the moment everyone remembered most wasn't the victory. It wasn't the battle. It wasn't even the return of the Alpha's memories. It happened 1 week later. The entire kingdom gathered in the snowy courtyard. Thousands watched. Warriors, servants, children, nobles, everyone. Ronan stepped forward. Then, the Alpha King lowered himself onto one knee, before his own wife. Gasps spread through the crowd. Ava stared in shock. Ronan smiled. This time, his voice carried across the kingdom. I'm choosing you on purpose. Tears filled her eyes. I chose you before. A pause. And I choose you again. Snow drifted gently around them. Beautiful. Silent. Perfect. And for the first time since the attack. Everything felt right. Because memories may fade. Time may change people. And life may break hearts. But real love finds its way back. Every single time. Like this video if you believe soulmates exist. Subscribe for more emotional werewolf romance stories. Share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Fissy. Because the next Alpha love story may be even more heartbreaking. And even more unforgettable.